Hey, welcome back to the shop here at Hemmings. Today we're getting back on our 70 C10 project. We just finished up our 700 R4 swap, and today we're going to get into suspension and brakes. We're going to be doing a disc brake setup, and we're going to lower the truck a little bit, but we're going to continue on with our theme of trying to keep everything you can see looking stock. When we introduced our C10 project, we talked about some of the suspension stuff we were going to do, based mostly around a front disc brake swap. Now in 70, you could not get front disc brakes on a Chevy truck, and then in 71, they all had front disc brakes, but they also got 5-lug wheels. Glenn wants to keep the wheels he has, so we're going to do basically a stock front disc setup from a 71, 72, but with rotors that are drilled for 6-lug. That's fairly straightforward. But we're also going to use a set of drop spindles. Now, when Glenn got the truck, he wanted to lower it, and he put springs in it to do that and didn't change anything else. Now we're going to put drop spindles in that will give us 2.5 inches of drop in the front, but the springs that are in the truck will then be too short. So we're going to put new front springs in to get it back up, and then we've got new rear springs to level it out. I think Glenn's going for about a 3-inch drop all the way around. We'll have to see how it sits once it's all done. Now, drop spindle is a pretty common item, but just in case you're not familiar, it's fairly simple. This pin is really the spindle. The rest of it is more of the steering knuckle. And a drop spindle takes the pin and moves it up from where it would have been in a stock location. That lowers the ride height of the truck, and the advantage is the suspension geometry stays where the factory intended, and you retain the full travel of the front suspension. These are pretty heavy duty, and they look a little different from stock, but I think a lot of that is just to make them strong. We've also got factory style splash shields for the brake to keep with that factory appearance that we're trying to maintain.
All right, just going to start by taking the wheels off, then it'll be ball joints, tie rod ends, and then we can let the spring out, and then we're going to change the spindle. Nope. So far I've undone the tie rod end, I've undone the brake line, and I've undone the sway bar. Upper ball joint is loose. Now I just have to swing the hammer and get the bottom one loose. The whole reason we're getting in here is get rid of these. Update it from 1970 to 1971.
Yeah.
Now I can see the ball joint. What you need?
I think 3/4.
Don't scratch my pleasurizer.
Might not touch that one.
Coward. All right, now I need a jack. All right, ball joint nuts are off. Now I can lower the lower control arm. Release tension off the spring. There we go. Oh yeah, there's no tension. The spring's so lowered, there's no tension. Oh. There we go. One junk spindle. New spindle. This seems to be a fit. So there's the difference in our spring heights, which is what, 1.5 inches you said, Terry?
Those springs are 3-inch drop that you're taking out, and I think Glenn said the ones that are going in are 2.5.
Okay. So here's our new spring. And if you notice where the coil stops, there's a pocket on your lower control arm that fits into. You want to make sure that's in there because the nature of a coil, as you can see, it's not completely flat. So if you don't have that in the pocket, you can actually change the ride height of your vehicle. So you want to make sure that goes in nicely and hits the stop. Yep, go ahead. Yep. Good. And make sure. Yep, I'm good. You can leave that there until I get these tight. Now, I'm wondering if this is the right ball joint now.
Doesn't fit through the hole?
Oh, it fits. I just can't get the nut to tighten. The whole ball joint's spinning. Lower ball joints. Not done, but it's loose. And I can't get it to grab to tighten up. All right, initially I thought this was a different ball joint and wouldn't work with this spindle because I was trying to tighten up the nut. The ball joint's a little worn, it's not bad, so the stud on the ball joint was spinning. So I've been trying to put force up on where the ball joint's tapered. So I was trying to get it tight in the socket so I could tighten the nut, and hammering down on it wouldn't work. So I just put a little force on the spindle and it grabbed the taper just enough that I got the nut tight, and we're good to go. Moving on to the top one. And that goes on right there, and this basically just protects the rotor from any water or road debris. Since we have these nice shiny new ones, we probably should put them on. Put the rotor on. Freshly greased inner bearing. And our washer. Castle nut. What I like to do with fresh bearings is get it very, very snug and spin it a bit, make sure everything seats in. I'll do this several times while I keep tightening it. There we go, English. Just to make sure that bearings and races are set. And then I'll back it off and snug it up again. Very lightly this time. What I'm going to do now is see which cotter pin hole that I want to use that lines up with a castle nut. And this one is going to go right there. You don't want to tighten this down too much to get the next cotter hole. You're better off being on the loose side than you are stupid tight. You'll just overheat bearings. Make sure your cotter pin seats all the way down in the castle nut. I like to bend one up and over the spindle and then cut off the excess on the other one. There we go. Now I'll clean the rotor face off real well, put the caliper on, our soft brake line, pads, sway bar end, and shock. And then we're done here.
What's the shock called?
The Pleasurizer, heavy duty. So they shouldn't have to use a screwdriver to spin that. Should be able to do that by hand. All right, so I put the caliper and the pads on, and I checked to spin the rotor by hand, and I couldn't. Come to find out, the inner pad, which goes between the ear on the spindle and the rotor, has some machining issues. So even though I could get it in just by, hitting it by hand, once it's in, I can't easily spin the rotor. So I need to take the rotor back off, and I'm going to hand file on the inside of this ear for the caliper and hopefully make a little more room for the pad to fit in there. Mix match of aftermarket parts. This stuff happens. We have our front suspension back together, figured out why our inner pad was sticking, and now the next conundrum has been the soft brake lines. That's a factory style for, I believe, 71, 72, and that goes up. If you see that little nub right there, fits in there, because as you turn the wheel, that locks it so this doesn't move and loosen itself. Problem I'm running into is this line is too long, and when I try to get it in there, it puts a lot of tight bends on it, and it actually gets in the way with the upper control arm. So we got some aftermarket ones that are a little bit different. They did the same thing, but worse, because this is longer. So I found online a part number for a shorter Buick, I believe this is for, and going in the same direction, pointing up, it's actually even worse in hitting the upper control arm. So what to do? A little more research. A lot of people go to the 73 square body style, and they move this whole brake assembly in front of this. We're trying to keep this looking stock, so what I came up with was to put a notch right here. So now, get it that way. Now my brake line comes out that way, but it's still got the hit to it in that little notch. I was very careful to keep it nice and tight. So hopefully running it back this way, it's all out of the way. When I cycle it, that's fine, it works, it clears, but our suspension's at full droop. I need to compress it, make sure it's going to clear the tire, doesn't rub, clear the suspension. But we also need to do the brake booster and everything up top. So let's do that and get the whole system together, and then we'll check and make sure everything clears.
All right, we're moving under the hood now to deal with the master cylinder. On this truck, we're not only going from drum to disc brake, but we're also converting from manual to power brake. And we talked earlier about the fact that Glenn went to a junkyard, found a 71 or 72 truck, and pulled all these bits, then sent them out and had them restored. He wants this thing to look fairly well stock when you open the hood. So this booster is an original GM unit. It's got these braces that go to the firewall. Now, normally on a GM car of this period, if you were going from power brake or from manual brake to power brake, you'd just unbolt the manual master cylinder and you'd bolt the booster at this point onto the studs that are coming through the firewall. On these trucks, they use this bracket that stands the booster off and has an extra lever, and it makes it a little more complicated. Thankfully, Glenn took pictures of this thing, so we were able to figure out how it all went together after he had it detailed. So Junior's unbolting the manual master cylinder now. Glenn also got us a pre-bent brake line kit that we're hoping is going to allow us to mount this, the new restored proportioning valve, and the new disc brake master cylinder, and then just put the new lines in without having to cut and splice anything. How are you looking there? Do you think that's going to work out?
Figuring out the GM, which size is the brake line nut, but other than that, we're getting there.
Okay, well, hopefully this is all going to bolt together. We'll see how it goes. But Junior's got the booster and bracket assembly up on the firewall, and as soon as he stuck it up there, we both got a little nervous because it really holds the booster up pretty high, and we're wondering if it's going to clear the hood. Now, it's all GM stuff. It's made for these trucks, so fingers crossed it should work, but As soon as he gets that snugged up, we're going to very carefully lower the hood and make sure that's all going to fit.
Oh yeah, we have plenty of room. Just mounting the master cylinder up to our booster, just to try and figure out brackets, brake lines, proportioning valve, and where it all goes. All right, we have that on. This is our combination valve, proportioning valve. That goes on there. So that will help line it up. General Motors, brake lines. You have all different size fittings. We're bouncing back and forth between 3/16 line and quarter line. The rear line here basically goes underneath the motor, down the passenger frame rail. It's all one piece. To change it would be an absolute nightmare. So I have a 3/16 to 1/4 inch line adapter. The factory one was a 1/2 inch thread, but our adapter is 7/16. So I had to take our 1/2 inch thread off, put a 7/16 thread on, and I might just have enough to put a flare on it, which would be really good because it's bent just the way it is. That being said, anybody ever used one of these, they know this is an old school flare. I can't even tell you the last time I used this, but I am so glad right now that I have it. Because of its thinness, it is just enough. I think it's going to give me what I need. And I'm really, really glad I never threw this out. So we're going to clamp this on. Like I said, it gives me just enough room. And if you've used these, you know that they're very prone to slipping on steel line. I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that this will work the first time. So with flaring, is like most on a double flare. It's a 2-stage process. So I'm going to do my first flare. Hope that line does not slip. First one. We see if that slipped. Nope, I can tell you we got our first flare. That is fantastic. Except I can't get my die out. It's trapped. Oh, well, looks successful. Do some adjustments. Tighten up our brake line. Remembering that the adapter is just brass. There, rear line is done. Now I have to basically do the same thing on the front line, which is actually in the back. Still have to hook up the pedal, make sure that's all working with each other. Now I just need to pull the master off and go do a bench bleed, and then we need to bleed the entire brake system. All right, bench bleeding your master, exactly like the term says. It's a lot easier to do it on a bench. You can do it in your car as well. It's just single person. It's a little bit easier, like this. I've noticed a lot of the new masters today, they come with plugs in the ports and they tell you to leave the plugs in and bench bleed it that way. I prefer to use the lines that go in. To me, it seems a lot faster. The 1 or 2 times I've tried to bench bleed with the plugs, not a happy camper. It took a long time. This is how I've always done it and how I'm going to continue doing it. Now, typically you can just buy a kit that has all the little fittings in it, a couple pieces of tube. This one nicely comes with a little clip that I don't think is going to fit on this one. That helps keep the tubes down in the fluid. You want to make sure these stay down in the fluid so you're not sucking any air in. The whole point of this exercise is to get all the air out. We'll get those down at the bottom. We'll top off with some brake fluid. Now you can also do a quick and dirty by just covering it with your fingers and have somebody else pressing on the brake. That makes a heck of a mess with the cost of brake fluid. I'll do it this way. You can reuse the brake fluid, you're not losing any. So just take a screwdriver, wood dowel, whatever it takes. And what I like to do is just very short strokes, and you can see all the air coming up out. And basically just keep doing this until you have no air present. If you start getting a lot of bubble in your fluid, just let it sit for a little bit because it's very easy to keep sucking bubbles back in. Patience is what's required for this one. And that is how you bench bleed a master cylinder. We have our master bench bled. And now I need to basically reassemble our whole system and try not to spill as much brake fluid as possible. I have a towel down here in the inner fender to try and keep it off the paint as much as humanly possible. Try to get this all hooked up as quick as I can. All right, now that we have our bench blade master in, next will be to go around and bleed the brakes. And like most vehicles, but not all, always check your manufacturers. Start the farthest brake line from the master, which is going to be the passenger. Oh no, on this it's going to be driver rear, then passenger rear, passenger front, driver front, and then we should have good brakes. There's a bunch of air.
Up. Down.
All right, that is it for bleeding the brakes. We'll wait until we take it out for a test drive, and then we'll know for sure how everything's working. But how's the pedal feel, Terry?
Feels really good.
So right here is what is generally called a combination valve. It has a proportioning valve, residual valves, and a shuttle valve all in one. The shuttle valve is in case of an emergency. If you lose your front brakes or your rear brakes, the shuttle will move over and block off that system that has a problem, so you won't lose the brakes in the other system. I just went to check this to make sure everything was okay, and this is the little switch for it. When the shuttle moves, it pushes up on that pin, it grounds out that post, and you get the brake light on your dashboard. I just checked this one and it was tripped. Now this unit was rebuilt. I would assume it would have been centered when it was rebuilt, but I may have messed it up. Either way, if we look down in here, you can actually see the shuttle and see that it's offset. So I'm just going to take a poker here and just shove it over, and then you can see it actually looks like a little barbell in there. There's a little recess that this switch sets in and tells you that everything's good. Now, when you bleed the brakes on these systems, you should have a lockout plug. This replaces the switch. This little pin right here locks the shuttle valve, so no matter how hard you press on the brakes, the shuttle won't move. So if you have a really hard time bleeding brakes on a vehicle with a combination valve, you want to check and make sure that shuttle is where it's supposed to be. So I am going to lock it out now with this, and you can buy these lockout plugs just about anywhere. They're all the same. I believe there's only one style for SAE vehicles. And once we bleed this real quick, I'll show you how to check your switch and see if it's been set or not. Up, down, And to test if your shuttle valve is moved, all you need is a test light. Hook your ground clamp up to the positive on the battery. And because this switch is ground activated, if you touch ground and your light goes off, you know it's working. If you touch your switch and the ground goes off, you know your shuttle is moved. So you need to check that and recenter it. And that's how you test if your shuttle's been moved. No light, shuttle's exactly where it should be. Everything is copacetic. Most important piece, plug it in when you're done.
All right, we're almost done here, and one of the last little touches is this shift indicator for the steering column. So this one's got 4 gears, including overdrive. It should go right in place of the original one, so I'm just gonna try to bolt that in right now. This one is different, and I got a feeling it ain't gonna fit. So we thought we were all set with our new indicator, but as you probably saw in the previous shot, it had all kinds of extra plastic down there. I suspect that's because it's for either a tilt column or a later van or something. We were going to go look to see if we could get a different one, and before we could do anything, Glenn cut the bottom of it off. So now it fits into its holder, I think. Yeah, it fits in there. So we'll just run the screws into it. All right, we got the indicator on. Let's see if it actually indicates. Park, reverse, neutral, overdrive, drive, second and first. Not only does it get all the gears, but it actually points to the right thing. That's kind of amazing when you're using factory shift linkage for an overdrive swap. So I'm gonna call that a win.
Pump, pump, vroom. Plenty of oil pressure. Clock's working, we're charging. Tack is working. Brakes are tight, we're good to roll. All right, overdrive transmission is in, disc brakes are in. We also added a tack and a clock, a couple of upgrades. Also gave it a tune-up. It's doing awesome. I don't know what else to say other than that. We're currently cruising at 65 at about 1,700 RPM. Can't wait to hear what he's got to say about the fuel mileage. Definitely going to be an improvement there. I love this truck. I just have to say, this thing is just incredible. It's awesome. Takes you into the Wayback Machine. The 700 R4 swap into where a 350 was. Very easy to do. Definitely worth it. All that said, this isn't my truck. It needs to go home. We've got to give Glenn a call, tell him to come down and pick this thing up, and then we're going to be moving on to our next project. As always, thank you for watching.